The salt air hung thick over the Naval Special Warfare Training Compound as Lavra Foster stood at the edge of the shooting range, her hands steady despite the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders. Behind her, a gallery of senior military officials, Pentagon observers, and skeptical special operations veterans had assembled to witness what many privately believed would be a failure. The sun beat down mercilessly on the California coastline, but Lavra had long ago learned to ignore physical discomfort. What she couldn't ignore was the historical significance of this moment. For months, the debate had raged through the corridors of the Pentagon and across the floors of Congress. Should women be allowed to serve in the most elite special operations units? The arguments had been fierce, passionate, and often deeply personal. Opponents cited physical standards, unit cohesion concerns, and decades of military tradition. Proponents pointed to capability, merit, and the fundamental principle that excellence should be the only criterion that mattered. But all the words, all the studies, all the heated exchanges had led to this singular moment: 15 shots, 15 targets, and one woman who had demanded the opportunity to prove that capability transcended gender. Laura's journey to this moment had begun years earlier, in a small town in rural Pennsylvania where she had grown up hunting with her father in the dense forest that surrounded their family farm. Her father, a Vietnam veteran who rarely spoke of his service, had taught her to shoot with a patience and precision that bordered on the meditative. He had shown her that marksmanship wasn't about aggression or bravado, but about control, discipline, and respect for the weapon in your hands. By the age of 12, Lavra could consistently hit targets at distances that impressed even the most experienced hunters in their community. By 15, she was winning regional shooting competitions against adults who had been handling firearms since before she was born. But shooting targets on a range was one thing. What Lavra wanted was something entirely different. She wanted to serve her country at the highest level possible. She wanted to be part of something larger than herself, to be tested against the most demanding standards the military could devise. When she enlisted in the Navy at 19, fresh out of high school and hungry to prove herself, she had already set her sights on the impossible. Becoming a Navy SEAL, the obstacles were immediate and formidable. At that time, women were officially barred from serving in special operations combat roles. The policy was clear, unambiguous, and had the weight of decades of military tradition behind it. But Lavra was patient. She excelled in every assignment she received, volunteering for the most difficult postings, seeking out additional training opportunities, and building a reputation as someone who never accepted anything less than excellence. From herself, she completed advanced tactical training courses, earned expert qualifications in multiple weapon systems, and studied the history and methodology of special operations with the dedication of a doctoral candidate. Her commanding officers took notice. Some saw her as a troublemaker, a woman who didn't understand her place or the realities of military culture. Others recognized something different, a sailor who embodied the warrior ethos more completely than many of the men who talked endlessly about their toughness but wilted under pressure. When the policy debates began in earnest, when the Pentagon started seriously examining whether combat roles should be open to women based on capability rather than gender, Laura's name started appearing in classified memoranda and high-level discussions. The test that had been devised was both simple and brutal in its implications. 15 shots at 15 targets, each representing a different aspect of the marksmanship skills required in special operations. Some targets would be stationary, others moving. Some would be at close range, others at distances that required exceptional precision and judgment. The shooters would be under time pressure, would be required to transition between different shooting positions, and would be evaluated not just on accuracy but on decision-making under stress. It was designed to be the kind of scenario that special operations personnel might face in the field, compressed into a single demonstration that would either validate or destroy the argument for integration. Lavra had trained for this moment with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She had run miles through the surf with weighted packs, had practiced shooting after physical exhaustion had turned her muscles to jelly, had studied the psychology of performance under pressure until she could recite the principles in her sleep. She had worked with sports psychologists, reviewed footage of her own shooting sessions frame by frame to identify microscopic flaws in her technique, and developed mental routines to maintain focus even when everything around her was chaos. She knew that she wasn't just shooting for herself. She was shooting for every woman who had ever been told she wasn't capable, for every female service member who had been denied opportunities based on assumptions rather than assessment, for every girl who dreamed of serving her country without artificial limitations. The range officer called out the first command, and Laval moved into position. The first target appeared at 50 meters, a standard silhouette that would have been trivial under normal circumstances. But nothing about this was normal. Lavra controlled her breathing, allowed her body to settle into the familiar mechanics of proper shooting form, and squeezed the trigger with the smooth, consistent pressure her father had drilled into her decades ago. The round struck center mass. 1 down, 14 to go. The second target was closer, requiring a rapid transition and engagement at 25 meters. Lavra pivoted smoothly, her muscle memory taking over, her conscious mind stepping back to let the thousands of hours of training guide her movements. Another perfect hit. The gallery behind her remained silent, watching with the kind of intensity that made the air feel electric. She could feel their attention like a physical weight, but she had trained for this too. The noise didn't matter. The opinions didn't matter. All that mattered was the next target. Target 3 appeared at 100 meters, a distance that required real precision and skill. The wind had picked up slightly, a variable that Lavra registered and automatically compensated for. Her shot flew true, striking within inches of the target's center. She heard someone in the gallery release a breath they had been holding, but Lavra was already moving to the next position. The fourth target was a moving silhouette, tracking laterally across her field of fire. This was the kind of shot that separated competent marksmen from elite operators. Lavra led the target by the precise amount required, her finger applying pressure at the exact microsecond when geometry and timing aligned perfectly. The bullet found its mark. 5, 6, 7. Each shot was a statement, a rejection of doubt, a physical manifestation of capability overcoming prejudice. Laura's mind remained absolutely clear, her focus so complete that the world narrowed to include only her weapon, and the targets that represented years of struggle and determination. She wasn't thinking about politics or policy anymore. She wasn't thinking about the historical implications or the arguments that would follow regardless of her performance. She was simply executing, performing at the level she had always known. She was capable of reaching. The 8th target presented a unique challenge, a partially obscured silhouette at 75 meters that required her to place her shot through a narrow window of opportunity. This was the kind of scenario that might occur in urban warfare, where precision meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Lavra took an extra half-second to ensure her sight picture was perfect, then fired. The round passed through the narrow gap and struck the target with authority. 9 and 10 came in rapid succession, testing her ability to engage multiple threats quickly without sacrificing accuracy. Laura's transitions were fluid and efficient, the product of countless repetitions that had encoded the movements into her neurological pathways so deeply that they required no conscious thought. Both targets registered center mass hits, and now she could feel the momentum building. 2/3 complete, and she hadn't missed once. The 11th target appeared at maximum range, over 200 meters away. This was the shot designed to test the absolute limits of marksmanship capability, the kind of shot that required not just skill, but also confidence in one's own judgment. Lavra settled into a prone position, controlled her breathing until her heartbeat was barely perceptible, and calculated the complex geometry of trajectory, wind drift, and distance. She fired, and for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. The round traced its arc through the California air. Then the target indicator confirmed the hit. The gallery erupted in whispers and quiet exclamations. But Lavra was already preparing for target 12. The final 4 targets were designed as a stress test, appearing in rapid sequence and requiring different shooting positions for each. Lavra moved through them with the fluidity of a dancer executing a well-rehearsed performance, her body and weapon working in perfect harmony. 12, 13, 14, each shot found its mark with the consistency that defined mastery. And then there was only one target remaining. The 15th target was positioned at moderate range, a final test that was neither the easiest nor the most difficult of the sequence. It was designed to be the kind of shot that could go wrong if fatigue, pressure, or distraction broke a shooter's concentration. Lavra took a moment to center herself, to acknowledge the magnitude of what was about to happen. 14 perfect. Hits meant nothing if she missed this final shot. Everything she had worked for, everything she represented, came down to this one trigger press. She thought briefly of her father, of the quiet lessons in the Pennsylvania woods of his belief that she could accomplish anything if she was willing to put in the work. She thought of the young women serving in the military who were watching to see if the doors would finally open. She thought of the principle that had driven her for years, that excellence should be the only standard that mattered. Lavra Foster lined up the shot, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger one final time. The round struck true, center mass, perfect. 15 shots, 15 hits, 0 misses. She had done it. The silence that followed lasted only a moment before. It was broken by something unexpected, applause. Not from everyone in the gallery. Some of the observers stood with arms crossed, their expressions unreadable, but from enough of them that the sound carried clearly across the range. The range officer approached Lavra with a rare smile on his weathered face. He extended his hand, and when she shook it, he said simply, "Outstanding performance, Petty Officer Foster." In the weeks that followed, Laura's demonstration became the centerpiece of policy discussions at the highest levels of military and civilian leadership. The military's integration policies were fundamentally restructured following her performance. Physical fitness standards were revised to emphasize functional capability rather than arbitrary measurements that bore no relationship to operational effectiveness. Training programs were modified to focus on individual performance under pressure, rather than demographic characteristics that had no bearing on combat effectiveness. Most importantly, selection criteria for elite military units were restructured to prioritize demonstrated capability over preconceived notions about who could succeed in high pressure. Operational environments. Lavra herself went on to complete the full special operations training pipeline, enduring the same brutal selection process as every other candidate. She suffered through Hell Week, survived the cold, the exhaustion, and the psychological stress designed to break those who lacked the mental fortitude required for special operations. She never asked for special treatment, never expected anything, except the opportunity to prove herself on the same terms as everyone else. And when she emerged on the other side, when she earned her trident and became one of the first women to serve as a Navy SEAL, the achievement was based purely on merit. 15 shots, 15 hits, and one woman's determination had rewritten the rules about who could serve at the highest levels of American military capability. The trident she earned represented more than personal achievement. It represented proof that excellence recognized no boundaries except those imposed by individuals, who were willing to demand the highest standards from themselves when it mattered most. Lavra Foster had taken 15 shots that changed everything, and she hadn't missed once. Her legacy would extend far beyond her own service, opening doors for generations of warriors whose capabilities had previously been dismissed without evaluation. In the end, she had proven that the only question that mattered in military service was the simplest and most fundamental one: can you do the job?